dear all students. Hope you are all doing well. Today we want to talk about a very, very important issue, relative clauses. Before we go through our own topic, let me talk about clause. Clause is a group of vocabularies, and in one sentence we can have one or more than one clauses. So today we want to talk about a kind of clause which means our defining or non-defining relative clause. In this lesson, we wanted to talk about these two relative clauses and what are defining and non-defining clauses mean. So let's go forward. As I told you, defining relative clauses are information we add to a sentence to identify or what we are talking about. We use defining relative clauses to give essential information about someone or something. Yes, it is really important to know that this kind of information, this kind of clause is really important. As I mentioned here, essential. They are essential. They are important. Yes, can you see that? This clause is important. So when I say it is important, when I say it is essential, it means that you cannot delete it. You cannot take it out from the sentence. So be careful about it. At the beginning of relative clause, we always need relative pronoun. What are relative pronouns? Who, that, which, whose, and whom. They are all here. We will talk about them one by one. Don't worry about it. So let's talk about some examples. Okay, let me show you some examples just right here. You will understand it much better. This is the lesson that will answer all your questions. This is the lesson. Look at this part of the sentence and look at that part of the sentence. There are two clauses just right here. The second clause is trying to identify one word, this noun, and it is important. Without that part, this sentence is meaningless. It doesn't have any meaning. As I told you before, it is essential. So if I just delete this part, which is defining relative clause, the first part is meaningless. It has no actually meaning. So you cannot delete or you cannot take out this part from the main clause. The meaning of the main clause depends on that defining relative clause. So look at it one more time. This is the lesson that will answer all your questions. What kind of lesson? That will answer all your questions. So this is the lesson. By itself doesn't have any special meaning. It doesn't make sense. Let's look at another example. They are the people who visited our house. What do you think here? As you see here, again we have two clauses. The second clause, which is defining relative clause, is giving information about the first word, which is necessary, which is essential. So we cannot delete it. So you are the people by itself doesn't make sense. So we need this part, which is defining relative clause. Is it clear for you? They are important. But on the other hand, we have non-defining relative clauses. Non-defining relative clauses, on the other hand, gives us extra information. When I say extra information, it means that they just give us more details about the sentence. Do you think that extra information or more details are necessary? No, they're not, because the sentence by itself is complete. So there's no need for that extra information. Let's review the things that I had already mentioned. We use it to give extra information. They are not necessary. And also we use some kind of relative pronouns, look like who, which, whose, whom, in order to introduce the relative pronoun. I will talk about them later. But there is one important issue here, that we don't have that in non-defining relative clauses. We use that in defining relative clauses, but not non-defining relative ones. Later, we will talk about them. So let's look at some examples. This lesson, which you can watch on Üsküdar University TV channel, will answer all your questions. So look at this underlined part. I want you to just be sure about this part. Look at it, which you can watch on Üsküdar University TV channel. It just gives you extra information. It just gives you some more details about the other part, about this lesson. But it is not actually necessary. So we can take it out. We can just delete it from the sentence, and still sentence makes sense. Look at it. Without that part, this lesson will answer all your questions. I just delete the underlined part. Oops, sorry. What about the second sentence? Peggy, who I work with, teaches main course. So what do you think? Without this underlined part, the sentence is meaningful? Yes, it is. It is meaningful because this information is extra. This information just gives us more information about Peggy, which is not necessary. And by itself, without this underlined part, it is meaningful. And we can take it out. So, important issue, punctuation. Punctuation in this lesson is really important. Comma or no comma. I told you before that we have two types of relative clauses: defining relative clauses and non-defining relative clauses. You tell me, which one was important? Which one was essential? Yes, you're right. Defining relative clauses were actually important, so we couldn't delete them, yes? On the other hand, non-defining ones give us extra information. So it is totally clear that when something gives us extra information, we can just remove it. We can just take it out from the sentence. So by putting two commas or by just having some pause, we can delete it from the sentence. So, as I told you, a defining relative clause, don't separate it from the sentence, don't use comma, and don't have any kind of pause. On the other hand, a non-defining relative clause, separate it from the rest of the sentence because it is extra. So by using comma, we separate that extra part from the rest of the sentence, okay? In this case, we show that this is extra. It is not necessary. So now it is quiz time. Are you ready for the quiz? So let's look at this sentence. I have a sentence just right here. I want to see the student who wrote this. What should you do? You should tell me that. Is it defining relative clause or non-defining relative clause? You tell me. Probably you're right. First of all, I give you a hint. You should clarify which part is relative clause. Who wrote this is the relative clause, and it gives information about the student. So it is a defining relative clause because it is necessary. Without that part, the sentence is meaningless. I want to see the student. Which student are you talking about? We have several students. So if I remove that part, if I delete that part, so it is meaningless. So it is defining. And because it is defining, no comma. Yes? Let's look at the other one. The IT guy who takes care of our systems fixed my computer. What do you think here? Think about it. Defining or non-defining? First of all, try to figure out which part is relative clauses. who takes care of our systems. You're right. So who takes care of our systems is our relative clause. So do you think that it is necessary? No, it is not. So as you could guess, it is a non-defining relative clause and it adds extra information. The sentence still makes sense if we take it away. Just take this part away. The IT guy fixed my computer. This sentence is totally meaningful. It is totally meaningful without that non-defining relative clause. It makes sense. So it's a non-defining relative clause. You just forget something. Comma. Yes, you're right. When it is non-defining relative clause, we need the comma. The IT guy, pause in your speaking, or comma in your writing, who takes care of our system, fix my computer. Perfect, perfect. Let's move on. As I told you earlier, at the beginning of defining or non-defining relative clause, we need relative pronouns. What were they? Who, that, which, whose. I'm going to just talk about them more. So which one should I use? Yeah? So let's see. First, let's talk about who. We use who when the relative clause relates to a person or a pet. So we are talking about human being or a pet. And most of the time, actually it refers to the subject or sometimes the object as well. Let's look at these examples. Emily is the person who helped me the most. Emily, who is very helpful, showed me how to do it. Is it clear for you? In both sentences, we have a person. And in this one, which is defining relative clause, without that part, the sentence is meaningless. It talks about person. So I use who. And here, with comma, you can totally understand that this is non-defining. You can remove it from the sentence. But again, it is talking about Emily, a person. So who is the relative pronoun which I should use here. The other relative pronoun is, let me see which one is whose. So if we are talking about possession, then we use whose as the relative pronoun. Let's look at these two examples. Do you know Burak? I'm definitely sure that you know him. Burak is the chef whose kebab is the best. So whose is talking about possession, whose kebab. Second sentence. Sarah, whose father is a doctor, studies medicine at university. This father belongs to Sarah. So whose father? So we use whose whenever we are talking about possessions. On the other hand, whenever we are talking about subject and object which are not human being, it is easy to understand, then we can use which. Look at these examples. Okay, actually it is only one example. Here is the lesson which I have been working on. Look at the lesson. Which lesson I'm talking about? The one that I have been working on. So because this relative pronoun is talking about the lesson, so it is not a human, I have to use which. And what do you think? Let's ask a question. Do you think that this one is defining or non-defining? Is it essential or no? It's not important, extra. Here is the lesson. Is it enough? What do you think? No, it's not enough. Here is the lesson of what? What kind of lesson it is? This is the lesson which I have been working on. In this case, with this relative pronoun, I just try to give you essential information. The information that without that, the sentence is not complete. The next relative pronoun is that. Most of you, I'm definitely sure that you prefer to use that because you think that you can use that instead of every other relative pronouns. But keep in your mind just defining relative clauses. Don't make such a kind of mistake. We use that only instead of who or which, and only in defining relative clauses. We cannot use that with non-defining relative clauses. It is really important. Don't forget to take notes about this one. Let's look at the examples. Emily is the person who or that, both are correct. Who or that helped me the most. So because we are talking about a person, for sure, we use who, and because it is defining, I can use that as well. Or here's the lesson which or that I have been working on. Again, because it's not human being, I use which or that because they are defining. On the other hand, in this sentence, Emily, who is very helpful, non-defining relative clause, so I cannot use that here, only who. Let's have a quiz, and this is the last quiz that you have for this lesson. I will give you 2 sentences. Look at, oops, I gave you the answer as well. No, Matt is an honest friend I've missed the most. Matt, I've missed the most as an honest friend. So what kind of relative pronoun should I use here? What do you think? Think about it. I'm definitely sure that you understand that it must be who, but can I use that as well? Yes, in the first sentence, no, in the second sentence. Because in the first sentence, it is defining relative clause, who and that, both are correct, but in the second sentence, because it is non-defining relative clause, only who is possible. 2 more sentences. Look at these 2. I like the book my classmate gave to me. I like this book my classmate gave to me. What do you think here? I like the book. Is it by itself meaningful? No, it is not meaningful. When you have I like the book, which book you are talking about? I like the book by itself is not meaningful. So you need another part. You need another clause to complete this sentence. So here I can use both which and that because this is defining relative clause. Am I right? Yes. Which and that my classmate gave to me. Which book? The one that my classmate gave to me. But the second sentence, I like this book. So it is completely clear which book you are talking about. I like this book. So this is non-defining relative clause, and it is totally clear and meaningful, the first part. The second part, or the second clause, just give you extra information. Perfect. It was the first part, or Unit 6 of your language leader, that was talking about relative clauses. Unit 7, we want to talk about another topic, modals. I'm definitely sure that you are all familiar with modals, but let's learn some more information about them. Obligation and necessity and deduction. You all know must and have to. All my students always come to me and say that, okay, Hojam, we don't understand the difference between must and have to. Whenever I should use have to or must. Okay, what do you think? We use have to and must both whenever we want to talk about necessary things, necessity and obligations, something which is really important. Yes, we can use both of them, but there's a slight difference. Let's look at that one. Have to. Whenever the order, whenever the rule comes from outside, someone else orders us to do something, it is a kind of general rule. In this case, we use have to. Use have to say something is essential. Do you remember essential? Important. It shows us that the obligation comes from, as I told you, do you remember? outside. It comes from outside. It is a general rule. So look at these two examples. They have to wear a uniform when they are working in reception. Someone else ordered them. She has to work tomorrow, so she can't come. The order comes from outside, so we use have to. But on the other hand, we have must. Whenever we want to talk about must, to say something is necessary and important again, but it is your personal opinion. You set these rules for yourself. You talk to yourself and you say that, okay, I must do this. I don't know, it is some kind of personal rules that you set for yourself. It expresses a strong obligations again, or necessity. I must phone my dad. Who told you? Who told you to call your dad or phone your dad? You yourself. So, must. It's his birthday. So these are the rules that you set for yourself. So whenever it comes from inside, must. Outside, have to. But one more thing. We don't have past form for must. So whenever you're talking about obligations or necessities in the past, you have to use past form of have to, which is had to. We don't have past form for must. So look at this example. I had to pay $85 to renew my passport last week. You had to post it earlier. The deadline was yesterday. So you see, these two sentences talk about obligations in the past. Because we don't have past form for must, we had to use had to. Everything is clear? I'm definitely sure that it is clear. So, as I told you, whenever we are talking about positive things, must and have to have the same meaning. We talked about the differences. But whenever it comes to the negative form, which is mustn't and don't have to, then no, they are totally different. So they both talk about obligations, but however, their negative forms are completely different in meaning. How? Let me show you. Mustn't. We still use mustn't to talk about obligations. Look like the positive cases. Look like the positive, it still talks about obligations. You mustn't do that. It's a kind of rule. You use mustn't to say it is necessary or important to do something. You shouldn't, actually, it's better not to say shouldn't. You mustn't do that. In the house, I mustn't wear shoes, to keep the house clean. I mustn't. Or we mustn't forget to tell them about the party. Obligations. But don't have to. What do you think? Here, there is no obligation anymore. It is totally optional cases. It depends on you. We use don't have to show that there is no obligation. See? There are optional choices here. You can do something if you want to, but it's not necessary. So look at this guy. In one photo, he is wearing tie, but in the other photo, he's not wearing tie. So it means that it is optional. It is not kind of rule. So I can say that you don't have to wear wear a tie in our office. It is not a rule. Optional cases. You don't have to. It depends on you. If you like, do it. If you don't, that's fine. You don't have to go to the bank to do a transfer. You can do it online. Look at here. How many options do you have? You have two options. To go to the bank or just to do it online. Yes? So it depends on you. You have options. In these cases, we can use have to. Don't have to, actually, the negative form. The last topic that I want to talk about is models of deduction. Do you know what deduction means? Whenever you start thinking and guessing about something, you start making conclusion. You see something and you just, according to that knowledge, you start thinking about it and make guess. Deduction means guess. Use modal verbs to make deduction or guesses about the present based on evidence. Actually, we can use must, can't, and could or might whenever we want to talk about deduction. But actually here, whenever we want to express different levels, we use different modals. I will explain them one by one. We use must whenever you are certain about something which is true. So whenever you are sure that something is true, use must. Whenever you are sure or you are certain that something is not true, you should use can't. And whenever you think that something is possible, you are talking about possibility, you can use might or could. I will give you hundreds of examples here. Don't worry about it. First of all, must. Look at that guy over there. What is he doing? He's crying. Imagine that your classmate in class, he or she is crying. You just start thinking, what happened? You just start making conclusion. Just start guessing. What has happened? He must have failed the exam. This is the deduction. This is the guess that comes to your mind. Yes? So you are certain that this is true. Look at these examples. This must be her house. I can see her car in the garage. Because you see her car in the garage, because you see an evidence just right there, you become sure that this must be her house. Phil's hair is wet. When my hair is wet, what do you think? You just start guessing that, okay, the weather can't be sunny. Yes, it is rainy. So this is your guess. This is your deduction. So Phil's hair is wet. It must be rainy. The door is open and the lights are on, so he must be home. The lights, the door, these are all evidences that you come up with this solution. He must be home. So whenever you're certain, must. So what about can't? As I told you earlier, we use can't when you are sure that something is not true. Look at these examples. Again, Phil's hair. Phil's hair is wet. Do you think that it is sunny? It can't be sunny. It can't be sunny because his hair is wet. Or the car is gone and their lights are off, so come up with conclusion. Yes, they can't be home. So we use can't because we are certain or almost certain that something is not true. And at the end, we have might or could. We use might and could, as I told you earlier, when we're not sure. We're talking about some kind of possibility, yes? So look at this guy. He's thinking, maybe. You are talking about possibilities. She's not here yet. She might be stuck in traffic. He's not answering. When he is not answering, what do you think? He could be in class. Possibility. I lost my keys. Whenever you lost your keys, you just try to think about the possibilities, yes? It might be at work, or it might be, I don't know, in the car. These are all possibilities. So this is the things that we talked about, and the last one is a quick quiz. I have a couple of questions for you. Let's just look at them. The house isn't hard to find. It's the red one at the end. You miss it. What do you think? I want you all to answer. Do you think that you must miss it, you might miss it, or you can't miss it? What do you say? Perfect. You can't miss it. It is obvious. You are sure that something is not true. And what an amazing trip. You must have some incredible photos. You might have some incredible photos. You can't have some incredible photos. It's easy to guess, yeah? Because it is talking about possibilities. And we had already mentioned that whenever we are talking about possibilities, we have to use might. Am I right? Yes. Perfect. And two more questions. The first one, that be the vegetarian option, it's got chicken in it. So must, could, or can't. Be careful. It's got chicken in it. What do you say? That must be the vegetarian, could be, or can't be. Easy one. Can't. Perfect. And the last one. Have you got your passport? I'm not sure. Be careful about this part. I'm not sure if you will need it, but they must ask you for ID, or they might ask you for ID, or they can't. What do you say? Yes, you're probably right. Might. So I hope you all enjoy these lessons, Unit 6 and Unit 7 from Language Leader, and hope to see you soon. Bye. Have a great day.